Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone.
Nous allons pouvoir commencer
We're
cette
going to be
après-midi
starting this workshop,
données d'activité aux données d'émission pour les acteurs africains.
which is about access to climate data for non-state actors in Africa. I want to thank all of our panelists for their presentation, or our co-hosts and our participants who are already 40 or 50, and our interpreter, who is going to help us communicate between the English-speaking people and the French-speaking people. So please remember to not speak too fast or slow enough. I will be coordinating I am Amaury, coordinating the work of the observatory. Just to remind you that Climate Change is an organization that was created in 2015, upstream of the COP21, to gather non-state actors for them to work together on various themes and topics for climate change and adaptation and the impact of climate change. We run three main activities: the portal, which is online, both in French and English, with various tools like a library and a schedule and a mapping that stresses out the various best practices and actions on field actions in Africa. The second activity, the one I'm coordinating, which is the observatory, we often do reports, and we have an annual report of a climate plan, climate action, from organizations, from NGOs, from finance players, from civil societies. This is again both in English and in French. Okay, just to also inform you that you can follow the interpretation, there is a bottom, at the bottom of your screen, you will find a button which you can click on to get either French or English. Now, the third activity.
Excuse-moi, Amaury, il faut juste, je ne sais, qui change les diapositives
Pardon,
chez vous?
c'est moi.
Parce que du coup, tu n'es pas passé
Oui.
à la voilà.
Voilà. Donc ça, c'était pour la petite présentation de Climate Change. Donc je disais, la troisième activité, c'était...
So the third activity that we run are our annual summits, which we organized in order to gather the whole climate change community. In the last few years, we were doing regional African summits to get the possibility for the coalitions to meet together and keep working on the various roadmaps. Of course, we've not been able to organize one this year, which is why we've been running this series of virtual workshops since last September to continue to mobilize our community and continue working together on this roadmap. This particular workshop is part of this series of virtual workshops, and this is a reflection which we've been taking since 2018 regarding access to climate data. This is something that we've been discussing since 2018 about African Climate Change Summit in Abidjan, after we had a first session in Lomé to identify the various challenges in connection to climate change per country or per territory, and the reluctancy of some of the national government issues to share this data or other and identify African initiatives to try to plan national climate action. In 2019 in Accra, we were able to take it deeper and come to a common understanding of our obstacles and the difficulties of accessing data, whether it be local or national data. And we also identified the first cooperation tools and experiences which could be shared and repeated elsewhere. And in 2020, we've been running this series of workshops in order to take it even further. We had a first one on adaptation data in September. The second one is today, and we're talking about activity data. And there will be a third one regarding emission factors and calculation methods, beginning of 2021. The objectives of these workshops, the three workshops, is to identify the African initiatives in order to improve access to climate data and the governance for local actors, to explore concrete leads for collective work and a space for collaboration. And finally, to try to capture through these some teachings and some principles that could be common to all of these stakeholders. So I'm going to now introduce Vanessa Lobin, who is an expert, and she's also the director of projection at Climate Change. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
I just remind you that a live translation is available if you click on the interpretation button. So please, you can follow us. Donc, je suis Vanessa Lobin. Je suis
So
ravie
I'm Vanessa Lobin. I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm going to be leading this workshop, co-hosting this workshop. I'm a consultant and expert in adaptation. I'm also a member of Climate Change. I've been a member for a long time. And it's a great joy for me to be here with you today and co-host this workshop. During this workshop, we will be addressing a few topics, a few issues, when we talk about access to activity data. And to talk about these various issues, we will welcome our panelists today, who will be Gabriel Follin-Arbelet, who is project manager at Kinome office. He will be talking about forest and how to measure the emissions data in forests in Africa. Then we will have Jafarou Abdulrahman, who is a program officer IT at ECRE, which is the Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency at ECOWAS. Joël Nana, who is a project coordinator at the Sustainable Energy Africa, SEE. And finally, we will have Marie Colson, who is a project coordinator for mobility at FEU. Just to give us a bit of a context, this workshop, as Amaury was saying, is part of a series of 3, and we've been discussing for the last couple of years in our various climate change summits in Africa since 2018. And we realized it's nothing new really, but we realized that we needed to mobilize as non-state actors regarding climate data in the broad sense, that is, in order to improve climate action, climate plan, and to also measure the impact of the measures that have been implemented, and also to mobilize even further the decision makers at a national level in order to speed up action, climate action. So we've had a couple of series of debates and discussions. So the idea came up that we should have these workshops to take it further, to be more specific about the kind of a message and advocacy message that we could have on a common basis as non-state actors regarding climate data. We had a first workshop in September on adaptation, and then we have this workshop today regarding the activity data, and there will be a third workshop in January of 2021 on methodology and how to calculate emissions and data specifically on the African continent. We will need to take it even further and be more specific about each country in Africa. Just to remind us today, just to give you an overview, sorry for recalling these basic facts, which we already know, and how we make the calculation. Just to make the calculation, we multiply the activity data by the emission factor, which is an average on one particular unit. For example, if you want to calculate the amount of emission for a trip by car, you have the number of kilometers and you multiply this by the emission factor, which is a quantity of CO2 emission that is released per kilometer for this kind of car, and that's what you get. You get this calculation. I'm just reminding this so that we can remember that we were talking about activity data, not emission factors, which will be the topic of a future workshop. Now, the purpose for this workshop today is to talk about our various constraints and concerns and issues regarding the collection of and the analysis and the use of activity data regarding transportation, forest, energy, etc., all these various fields. But these activity data would help us to make a precise calculation of emission factors, whether it be for a local authority or a company or territory or even a project, so that we can implement the appropriate mitigation measures. Please mute your microphones. Thank you. Now we need to ask this question as non-state actors. There are two main challenges or things at stake. We need to act on GHG emissions knowledge. We need to understand what is the situation in each country. We need to act on the knowledge, the current knowledge of GHG emissions, to know and appreciate what are the trends in terms of future emissions of GHG, and also the tendencies and the trends to come in 20, 30, 40 years. We're looking at 10, 15 years ahead. So we want to take part in the inventory processes at a national level, but also at a local level, and also participate at the elaboration of future emission pathways and understand how the activity data will evolve in the future. As non-state actors, there are several things to consider. The fact that we produce and we can share this data production and provision. There's also the issue of methodology. How do we share? How do we improve the quality of the data at a national and local levels? And the non-state actor must and can take part in the advocacy in order to speed up the ambitions regarding adaptation measures, ambitions, in order to develop future leads. Now, the second challenge is to actually act on climate change mitigation measures implementation. To say it simply, there are actually there are several things at stake, of course, but the three main points would be the following: to implement projects and to strengthen our action. And first of all, we need to know the reference situation. If you do not know the situation at first, you cannot really handle it or manage it properly and know what are the levers for action to reduce the gas emissions. So we need to monitor the commitments made by the various stakeholders on CC mitigation, but also monitoring the and monitoring the commitments. In order to do that, non-state actors need to have access to these activity data to be able to verify and check and make sure that what has been done will have an impact.
Je vais pas aller beaucoup plus loin là-dessus. Vas-y, encore. Amaury. Voilà, simplement.
So just to conclude with this quote from Peter Drucker, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it, which is a simple statement, but it's truth. When we're talking about gas emissions, you need to have the right data, activity data, to be able to assess the mitigation measures. Today, we're going to be focusing, you can actually, yes, show the whole slide. So we will be looking three, but actually it's 4 stages or 4 steps when it comes to activity data. Of course, we have the collecting the data. How do people get involved in producing and collecting these data? But even beyond the collect, how do we make sure that these data are trustworthy? How can we use them? Of course, then the second aspect is the use, the analysis and the use of the data. We'll be talking more about advocacy with the decision makers. And then thirdly, this governance issue, which is key and transversal at the same time. The data, activity data have to be available for non-state actors so that they can play their role in monitoring and following through and watching over what is being done to make sure that this is all relevant. Now, in order to talk about this, I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Gabrielle Follin-Arbelet. Sorry, before we do that, I forgot. Let me just say that we have a survey. We will ask you to fill on this website, www.menti.com, with the code which you can see at the bottom right of your screen. And I'm going to ask you to classify or give priorities to the various actions. What are the priorities for the activities data? And access to activities data in Africa. So I will ask you just to take a quick look at these questions, which are both in French and English. Mobilize additional resources for the production of robust data, involve local stakeholders in the collection of activity data, make data more accessible to non-state actors for local action, strengthen the training of stakeholders for an adequate use of data, and build national strategies for combining data sources. We will show the results at the end of the presentations. So you can just take a look and just sort them according to priorities. So I'm going to hand over now to Gabrielle Follin-Arbelet, who is project manager, especially regarding impact measures at Kinome. Gabrielle, are you there? Yes, hello everyone. Can we see you on the camera? Okay, there I am. And I'm going to share my screen as well. Very quickly, I will ask you, or first of all, introduce your presentation by through two main questions. Kinome is specialized in forest management and how to measure gas emissions greenhouse gas emission
Et je voudrais simplement t'interroger
in
sur
relation to deforestation. So I just wanted to ask you,
qui pourrait, enfin, excusez-moi, je vais reprendre. La façon dont on voit que les données concernant les forêts
now regarding data in forest for climate action,
réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre en Afrique est relativement faible, en tout cas défaillante.
as we can see, this is fairly feeble and needs to be strengthened, the access to data. And so how could additional data, especially from international organizations, how could this improve the assessment and a better knowledge of the situation regarding forests and deforestation? So what are the challenges when it comes to getting and collecting data? Do you want me to answer this question through my presentation? Okay, yes, please do. I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, I hope you can all see it now. Accessing climate data in Africa. Thank you, Vanessa, for your question. Thank you, Climate Chance, for this opportunity to share about our experience today, and in particular in the area of forest and deforestation. Very briefly, who is Kinome? We are a social company based in France. And we join four occupations, which is research, advice, study research, projects, and NGOs, and education. These are our four fields regarding forests in the area of forest, climate, biodiversity, sustainable, and nutrition. So, which require these four aspects of research, advice, projects, and education in order to tackle the issue of deforestation and climate change. So, as a study office, we recently went to Guinea to revise what we call the national commitments of reduction of greenhouse gas emission, commitments which were made during the COP21. I'm just using this example to highlight some of the issues which Vanessa mentioned. First of all, we want to explain the necessity of using these data in order to get relevant commitment. Just to give you an example, in the case of Guinea, access to data has improved greatly in the last few years to get better references which are closer to the reality and to monitor in a much better way in the long run. In the case of Guinea, the statistics that were collected in the country highlighted the fact that the main consumption of energy, up to 75%, came out of the use of biomass and biocombustible, and which showed a discrepancy and a gap between the forest data which were carried out 30 years ago. So the first source of emission of were probably due to deforestation and the use of wood at a large scale. But the national data of the forestry inventory did not actually match with that reality. And as Vanessa was saying, if the situation could not help us take this into consideration, then it would be impossible to make clear commitments to fight against deforestation and climate change in the area of forests. Another particular aspect of the forest field is that it's difficult to collect data because it's highly decentralized. Therefore, in many African countries, forest inventories actually are several decades old. It's very difficult to implement and to collect this data because it requires a lot of logistics, which is why additional data could be useful to update the situation and the level of emission of one particular country, which is what we did and worked on with the use of a tool called Global Forest Watch, which some of you might be familiar with. It's an online platform to monitor forest everywhere in the world, and especially the deforestation aspect. So this platform has been going on for quite a few years and is based on satellite data by Landsat, which is one of the NASA satellites, which gives which has a good resolution and allows a good visualization of the deforestation. This is just a series of photos, and this is directly accessible on this platform. It's a very easy and user-friendly platform, the Landsat, and you can get access to these data from the NASA just with the use of this website. You can have very easy and easily accessible maps to visualize what is happening. You can both see where are the main points of deforestation. You can see that most of the globe is actually concerned by this issue of deforestation, especially in Africa. And throughout time, you can also compare different periods and different situations throughout the years. Now, the Global Forest Watch also allows from these data and the standard emissions data to give a better assessment of the CO2 emission due to deforestation. So concerning our particular activity, we were therefore able to match the data with the observation from the field, and we did see that there was a decline of the data of energy consumption, something, and the biomass, something which the forest inventory in Guinea did not take into account. Of course, Guinea is sovereign in the way they use the data. So it's always up to the government, to the national government, to choose how they're going to use the data, which data they're going to keep. But the Global Forest Watch tool helped to make a balance and to solve something that was a discrepancy and an obstacle to the references in order to make the appropriate commitments. Global Forest Watch has become very useful. And as you can see on your right-hand side, you can see on this chart, you can see the level of the emissions, which is much higher than the inventory from some decades ago. However, it does not replace a forest inventory. A lot of these, especially the net assessment of emission, the difference between the emission from the forest field less the emissions, this is not being assessed in a factual way in order to handle the data from the Global Forest Watch. These data did not give any clue about the forest in Guinea, the richness of the ecosystem, or in Guinea or in another country. And because these are satellite data, it doesn't give us any information as to the social, economical, or environmental reasons for deforestation and the commitments behind. So we need to understand also the reasons behind the deforestation. So this tool, the Global Forest Watch, does not bring any answer as to the reasons behind and does not replace, of course, field research. I just want to give you a quick illustration to show how non-state and state actors can work together to use the best tools possible, and how the national stakeholders can commit for this purpose. And this is the case of Ivory Coast, which has been involved in a leading project in West Africa. First, the undertaking of a national inventory, which is going to last for 2 years, because it started last year and will continue till next year, to make an assessment of the forests in Ivory Coast. And this has been implemented by the ONFI under the Ministry of Forest, with the participation of the IGN, which is an expert in data analysis, and the SODIFOR, which is also the equivalent of the National Office of Ivory Coast. So this helps to speed up the various sampling from satellite pictures in order to send out teams in the places which are more relevant for collecting forest data. I invite you to watch the video, which you would find in this presentation. Another system which was implemented, which is the surveillance system, called Starling, which is a tool focused on intervention against deforestation because of the cocoa culture. Again, this is a result of a collaboration. And we have another NGO called Earthworm, previously called the Forest Trust, and another private actor with Airbus, and gave some data for monitoring of the deforestation in time and to help with emergency intervention on the field. So this tool is still being implemented, but in 2019, we showed already that these interventions were very helpful. Now, this is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I was not able to translate this presentation into English beforehand. Thank you, Gabrielle. Several questions, of course, which are being raised, and we will try to answer all these questions. Just maybe ask you one question now. And the support of the international community regarding the collects of data, forest data. We can see that there are some tools that are more easily accessible, very user-friendly, which are there and available. But having said that, in order to strengthen the national data, it seems that we are still lacking means to do that. Is it something that you have realized, that Kinome has come to realize, and what does this mean in terms of advocacy? Yes, you're right. There are two aspects in this. First of all, to be able to complete forest inventories requires a lot of means, and a lot of the funders are quite reluctant to invest in such a project, which can be quite costly. They might just do an update. In the case of Ivory Coast, this is a 2-year project which costs about 7 million euros, and it's not necessarily the priorities of some of the financial partners to actually go for these projects and support these projects, which are so key, however, to undertake in the future more efficient programs. But one first key step is to use some of these tools like Global Forest Watch, which are very good, very easy to use, which could be easily made available for national parties to help them in their understanding of the situation, and therefore to include all these tools without having to actually invest too much. And whether it be the states or the lenders, financial lenders, this is something that we have realized in the case of Guinea. It required little investment in time because it's just the simple use of the Global Forest Watch data could actually help highlight and improve some data which were already quite old and improve the situation. So I think this is actually reachable for anyone, any ministry of environment or forest ministry could actually use that simple tool out of their own initiatives, or any NGOs could actually start using these simple tools, which are easily available on internet, in order to simply understand what's going on and then share the information with other people. Of course, yes, we do have these data, these tools, and there are many of them. We have the FAO, Global Forest Watch, and others. You can find data depending on the countries. However, there is a sort of a mistrust from the national parties regarding these international data. There's a sort of a mistrust, maybe because people don't really know the way this data is being collected, and maybe they have doubts as to the way that these data are being collected. So I'm going to now hand over to Jafarou Abdulrahman, who is IT project officer at ECRE, at ECOWAS, Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which is a platform for collecting data, energy data of 15 countries of the members, 15 countries members of the ECOWAS, and and therefore to look at the access to data, either national data or data which are produced by the national or international stakeholders. So Mr. Abdulrahman, in which way does ECOWAS collect these data, the energy data that is, and what is the added value of the regional data, and how is ECOWAS as an institution or regional institution how does the ECOWAS use this knowledge and the collect of data for action plan, climate plan?
Thank you, Vanessa.
Merci.
First of all, I'm very honored to be here today to contribute to the meeting. I will not, I know there's a short time, so I will not go into introduction because you already did that for me, and thank you for that. So I will just shortly share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. Okay. Today I'm just going to give a brief a summary of what we are doing within ECRI, and as well as ECOWAS, talking a little bit about ECOWAS in general, in terms of how we collect energy data from the member states. which we provide to the general public through the platform, the ECOWAS Observatory for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, as well as support the member state with energy planning. So maybe some of you are aware, you might have visited our website, you might have had some projects with us before, but just to give a brief introduction into who we are. As Vanessa said, ECRI is the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. This is, we are an agency of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is a regional, the Economic Community of West African States. It's a regional body which is composed of various departments and agencies dealing with various issues, all aimed at economic development within the West African community. So ECRI is an agency of ECOWAS, which was established on the 23rd of November by the ECOWAS Council of Ministers. We are based in Praia, and we work with focal points from each member state. Officially, ECRI was inaugurated on the 6th of July, 2010. And also we've been appointed by the energy ministers as the focal point for the C4All initiative. First of all, my presentation is just tied to the questions I've been asked to deal with. So the first point is how ECRI collects data. So given the short time, I'm just going to present an overview of the various means and ways in which ECRI work with the member states to collect this data. First of all, when ECRI started, we realized that yes, there is a gap and there is a problem in terms of data in the member states. And this led us to the development of ECOREX, which is the ECOWAS Observatory for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Because at some point, when we started, we had a lot of data, informal and formal data coming in. And so we said, okay, I think it's better to have a platform and processes in place to verify and update this platform and share with the general public so that everybody will be aware of what is going on in West Africa. So in 2012, like I said, we launched the ECOREX. And then after the launch, or should I say before the launch, we realized that we have to start somewhere, get a baseline of what is going on in terms of energy statistics. We included spatial data as a center mandated for renewable energy and energy efficiency. We had to also show some of the resources in terms of solar, wind resources, and that are out that we have in the region. So we also created the spatial data, and we collected as much information as we could. We did some assessment with some of our partners, just to give us a baseline of where to start. And then after we did this, just after the launching, we had to develop this framework that will govern this data collection, data analysis, data publishing, as well as just like a governance structure, so that we will give confidence to those who are using the data in terms of where the data is coming from and who is providing this data and how we check the data before it's all published. I will talk about the regional monitoring framework in the next slide, but it was developed to support the policies that was adopted, the renewable energy policy and the energy efficiency policy that was developed sometime in, we will talk about that. So what we did was that we had to know where we are at each point, because in this policy we had targets. So we had to know where we are and what steps could be taken in order to meet this target or in order to reformulate this target. So, and by so doing, the ministers designated 15 focal points from each member state to support this process. And then we started an annual collection and validation of data, and also as well as support member states to implement some capacity building activities to support their national data collection processes. So also there are quite a number of projects we've had after the launch of the EcoRex. And during this specific project, which is tied to some specific deliverables, we also had the opportunity to support member states in collecting some specific data that are not available, help them develop some framework, some policy, some governance structure, so that it would be easy for them to get this data at the national level, which we will use at the regional level as well. And so I just name a few: the ACP project, the market assessment from ROGEP, and the WACEC resource assessments, which we've done. We've done quite a number of resource assessment, but I just name a few. As well, we have the national focal institutions in each member state. We liaise with them time to time. Apart from having this national annual data collection, we time to time, when developments within their member states, we liaise with them to get such information. Sometimes we also we had to seek their approval before we proceed. And as well, we have a whole pool of energy staff within ECRI who are supporting the process, supporting the member states, and providing help to mobilize resources, to build capacity, and also develop skills in terms of data collection. And the last of which is desktop research. We have some number of staff internally who are into desktop research, will connect to Ministry of Energy portals, ratification regulators. Every day we are in contact with them, trying to improve or capture those things that are being done daily, so that we can present it better to the public. And as well as we work with donors, international donors from the World Bank, IRENA. Some of them we share data together, and we also get some data from them. So in a nutshell, this is, I don't want to dive into specific because of the time, but this is what we do in terms of how we collect this data from the member states. How can this data, the next question is, how can it be used to
Jafarou,
yes?
you have just 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So please make it short.
It's a small slide. How can we use this to develop policy which favors the sustainable energy? Like I said, we had the policy for renewable energy and energy efficiency, which was developed in 2013. This is just to highlight this page. So the point is that we need to constantly watch the implementation of this project, of these policies, how it is being developed. After the development of the policy with the member states, each member state developed their national action plans. So we developed this monitoring framework in order to assist in monitoring the implementation of the policies in the member states, to know where we are at each point and to see if we are achieving the targets. And by doing so, this will also help to improve on the policies for sustainable energy, providing support to decision makers and advice. So these are just some of the content and objectives of this monitoring framework. Due to the time, I will not dive into them specifically. So this is just a slide of what the report. Each year we produce a report on this monitoring framework, which is available online. It's also shared with some of our partners like REN21, IEA, and EFDB. So you can also access this report. And in terms of governance structure, I will not go into that too much, but over the years, we realized, in fact, last month we had a meeting with the focal points as well. So over the years, we've been able to bring out some of these points that could improve on the governance of this data. And one of it is that the capacity within the member state is very, very poor. And what we are doing is to seek for processes, seek for financing from donors to see how we can support them in developing a structure and a system to help them. And governance process is something that that should be done at the primary source. This is something we have found that it's not ECRI has all the processes, the governance structure, but we should make sure that the member state at the point of collection of this data, they also have it. And also make sure the member states assume leadership. In a governance structure, you have roles. So you have to make sure the member states are taking up the leadership role in order to make the data collection process work, and also continue approval of the collection and validation process. So thank you very much for your time, and muito obrigado, merci beaucoup.
Muito obrigado. Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Cet outil est correct, c'est vraiment un outil très riche.
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a very thorough tool. There was a question in the chat box, I think. The question was about the tool, and does the tool concern the energy, wood energy? Of course, yes, this is true. This is the case. So it's a powerful tool also for non-state actors, it seems to me, in order to take part and be part of this process of strengthening action, state action. So thank you very much, Jafar, for your presentation. Now I'm going to hand over to Joël Nana. We will try to come back to some of these questions afterward, but I will hand over now to Joël Nana, who is the project coordinator at Sustainable Energy Africa, SEA. Joël, you work mainly about driver data, especially regarding deforestation, and data regarding actual energy cooking and the use of energy in households. In which way does SEA intervene at the basis, really? That's what we want to do. We want to know, and this is your specificity, which is really to strengthen the data collect in households, household energy data.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yeah, you've already presented me, thank you. So I think I'm just going to dive into the presentation given the short time we have. So I'm actually going to respond to the three questions divided into, like, I'm going to try the reverse approach, like starting with what do we need, or what kind of insights or governance do we draw from the data? I think I saw a question just now in the chat. The question was, what do we do with the data? So I'm going to start with what do we do with this kind of data? And then it's going to inform the kind of data we need, and then how do we collect this data? So maybe a short introduction about Sustainable Energy Africa. I'll try to go slow for the interpreter as well. So Sustainable Energy Africa is an NGO based in South Africa, and we've worked with we work mainly with cities. So here we are at the level of the city, not the national government. And we've been working with cities for the past 20 years and have extended experience with over 20 cities in sub-Saharan Africa in this kind of similar work. So we've helped quite a lot of cities through various projects to collect this kind of energy profile at the city level, not just at the household level. But for this presentation, I'm going to focus particularly at the household level. So maybe let's go to yes, what kind of insights do we draw from household energy data? In all the projects we've worked on, I can name some of them, which is the C40 Climate Action Program. There is the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa. So usually the kind of data or the kind of insights we want from the household data is like, how do households use energy? For example, that's the graph of how households in Yaoundé use energy. This is actually data we collected for Yaoundé. Like, it gives you a picture of how do households use energy. And then you also want to know, like, what do households use energy for? Do they use it for cooking, for water heating, for space heating, or whatsoever? What are the different energy services? We also want to know probably what percentage of households income goes into energy service, like you start associating the cost aspect of it. Or maybe what are the trends across different households or income groups. Here again, you have a sort of picture that gives you how do different households, based on your income bracket, how do you use energy based on your income bracket? And what amount of energy will households require into the future? Like Vanessa talked earlier about some sort of modeling. We also do this kind of modeling to inform the city on how is the energy landscape going to change into the future, into the next maybe 10 to 50 years. And so it helps the city to plan. And like I said, for the initiatives we've worked on, it's mainly been focused on how do these insights inform the least cost electrification strategies, or maybe how do they inform clean cooking strategies in the most effective and cost-effective ways. So based on this kind of, what is the overall picture we want to draw? Usually the kind of data you need, of course, it depends on what you need the data for. And for the emission profiles or for the energy profiles, like I was asked to focus on, usually the kind of data you're looking at is the grid electricity demand. For example, how much grid electricity do households consume? You might also be interested, like, if they are distributed renewable sources, like rooftop PVs that are not connected to the grid, or off-grid systems, how much of these off-grid systems exist, and how many households are connected to such systems. In terms of solid fuel demand, there you are interested into the amount of wood used, the amount of charcoal used, the amount of other forms of biomass, and for what kind of energy services do the households use these different fuels. So it responds also to the question in the chat. He was asking about if wood energy is being collected. Yes, at the city level, even at the city level, yes, this kind of data is collected. Also, you're interested in the liquid fuels demand by energy services as well, which looks into kerosene and petrol, maybe for private cars, LPG, and so on. And what do the households use this kind of energy for? Do they use it for heating, for cooking, or for whatever services that they need? And going to the core of the presentation around data collection. Well, the truth is that there's no single place where you can get all the household energy data you need for your strategies, or for whatsoever reason you need it for. But most of the times, they are usually the first step, which is also the most expensive. And this is linking with the presentation of Gabriel earlier. Usually the primary data collection is quite expensive, it's quite onerous. And even in our projects, usually you don't have donors that are very willing to invest a lot of money into primary data collection. But nonetheless, under the various projects, specifically under the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa, we happened to work with a couple of cities, and we drew these 10 steps data collection process with them. Sorry, I'm going to go backward. So the 10-step data collection process, this is focused, this is targeting cities, of course. So it gives the cities like various steps towards data collection, starting with putting the team together, getting the different stakeholders on board, and maybe getting enumerators on the ground. Step 8, which is linked to the data quality control and then validation, and also the metadata around what kind of methodology did you use for what year, and all the kind of sources that goes with it. And well, the easiest way and usually the cheapest way to collect this kind of household data is to lean on the household census surveys. Most countries have this. I know of the Kenya, they actually published a very recent household census in 2019. So usually the National Institutes of Statistics are well equipped to have this kind of household data. Sometimes not very granular, so it's usually sort of quite kind of aggregate, but you can have a fair amount of this data from National Institute of Statistics. In our experience also with South African cities, the electricity utility companies have started being very open to giving us household data. So this doesn't happen in many parts of Africa, but here in South Africa, we've had this experience where we've contacted Eskom, which is the electricity utility company here, and they've provided us with this kind of data, not just for household, but for the various customer range, like the industrial sector and even the commercial sectors. And then we also, through another project, Sam said, we developed quite an extensive database for urban economies or for urban settlements across Sub-Saharan Africa, which gives you a picture or a rough picture of how much fuel is being used per household, how much kerosene is being used per household. So this database is not yet available, but it's going to be made available around November through the launch of a report we are preparing. And then you also have, like the presentation earlier, you have this open data portal, like the World Bank data portal, the UN data portal, IEA. Here, unfortunately, they're usually quite aggregate and targeting the national energy data. But for city-specific data or household data, you might have to go a bit deeper into the National Institute of Statistics. So globally, that's what I had to present. I kind of rushed through, but yeah, happy to take questions, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joël. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Let's move on. But I just want to ask Joël a question. Does SEA work directly with National Statistics Institute in order to improve the way the household data is collected, especially regarding the use of fuel and wood, fuel, which is a main driver of household energy in West Africa? Are there any collaborations or partnerships between you and the Institutes of Statistics? We don't
had that kind of exchange with directly with the National Institute of Statistics, but in South Africa, for sure, we've done that at several times because we've been quite involved with a lot of South African cities around developing their energy profiles. And usually we use the National Institute of, we use the data from the National Institute of Statistics here, which is StatsSA. And sometimes when we have queries, actually we've just completed a project this month where we were reviewing the data for Cape Town, for the city of Cape Town. And in the process of reviewing this data, we compared several databases. Maybe just to give you a quick background, South Africa has a lot of databases and is quite equipped more than many other African countries in terms of data. So through this project, we're able to compare a lot of databases, and where we found like nuances and issues with the data, we kind of channel it back to the Institute of Statistics or even the relevant stakeholders that here are the kind of queries we have regarding the data. Can you give clarifications? And when they realize also that there's a kind of flaw with the data, they usually appreciate this kind of feedback from people on the ground in order to improve their data set. So that's the immediate feedback we had from National Institute of Statistics.
Sans le micro, c'est plus compliqué. On voit bien donc cette collaboration entre...
Yes, thank you for sharing this example, this collaboration between non-state actors and statistic institutes, national institutes, which sometimes also lack means to work. And it's a good way to improve the quality and work together. I'm going to now hand over, but before we hand over actually to our last speaker, I'm just going to ask for those who joined us maybe to please go to our website, www.menti.com, with this following code at the bottom right of your screen. And please take part in a little questionnaire and tell us what, according to you, would be the priority.
Comment on doit classer les priorités d'action sur les questions des données d'activité pour l'atténuation en Afrique. Merci d'y répondre de façon à ce qu'on puisse présenter les résultats d'ici à la fin du...
Thank you for taking part in this questionnaire, and we'll be looking at the answers at the end of this workshop. We have 12 participants who have answered this questionnaire so far. Now we're going to hand over to Marie Colson, our next speaker. She's a project coordinator, mobility project coordinator at the IFOI. I won't try to even do this in German, which is an institute for energy. And we're going to be moving on to another topic now regarding mobility and anything that has to do with transport data in the broad sense. Marie, the EFEU has implemented a tool called the MYC, which is the Mobilize Your City Emission Calculator. Can you explain to us how this works? And how do you collect the data in order to use this emission calculator when it in the area of mobility, urban mobility? Thank you. I would do that. Thank you for inviting me to this workshop. I'm glad to be here with you today. I will try to be as specific and as quick than all of our other participants. So the IFOI, of course, is not easy to pronounce, which is actually an Institute for Environment and Energy of Heidelberg, which is a region in Germany. We are a research institute, independent research institute, a non-profit institute. We work in different sectors, and I work for the mobility sector, transport sector. One of the things that we do is inventories in terms of transport in Germany with a tool for doing reporting every year. We also work on the international scene with other international cities or countries, and in this respect, I work with the MYC project, Mobilize Your City. Yes, indeed. What I wanted to share, first of all, is the principle of data collection. We have a small specificity, which is a clear methodology based on two parallel methodologies, top-down, which we call, and the bottom-up and top-down. Top-down is the energy consumption inside the country, how much gas is being used, etc. This is mostly on the state base. These data often can be available at the level, and the bottom-up is a more complicated part, which is based on the use of cars, the use of trucks, the number of kilometers that are run every year, and the maritime sector. So we need to take into account all these various sectors and multiply the number of kilometers done by the energy consumption. And this is where all of these stakeholders come into playing. Of course, these data cannot be centralized only in one place, so we have to go and look for them. You have talked about the Mobilize Your City. It's a French-German initiative which was launched
qui a pour but donc d'aider les villes principalement, mais les pays sont aussi membres, à améliorer la mobilité et lutter bien sûr contre le changement climatique, donc le but étant la mobilité verte. Et nous avons dans ce contexte, donc là j'ai mis la petite carte pour montrer un petit peu qui participe. Alors j'ai vu qu'il y avait parmi les participants des gens du Maroc, de la Tunisie. On a déjà travaillé, on travaille d'ailleurs en ce moment, donc je salue au passage. Et donc, on a 61 villes et 13 gouvernements pour le moment qui font partie de cette initiative. Et dans ce contexte, on a créé un calculateur d'émissions pour les transports, voilà, donc qui s'appelle le Mobilize Your City Emissions Calculator. Ça, c'est pour vous donner une petite idée, parce qu'on parle données, mais bon, c'est bien de les voir, parce que c'est vague les données, mais quand on les voit, on se rend compte de ce que ça veut dire. Donc ça, c'est par exemple une liste de données qui est obligatoire à donner dans l'outil pour faire le calcul de l'inventaire des émissions de gaz à effet de serre du transport, que ce soit au niveau national ou local. Ce sont à peu près les mêmes. Donc on a le kilométrage par catégorie de véhicules, le nombre total de véhicules, le taux d'occupation des véhicules, la consommation par type de catégorie et par type de carburant. Donc voilà, toutes ces données-là, ce sont des données qu'il faut aller trouver, donc que ce soit au niveau national ou au niveau local.
Or local level, and it was clear that non-state actors, whether they be organizations, associations, agencies of various kinds, regional or local agencies, of course, have to play their part in this. It's kind of a detective kind of work. Did you have a presentation, a slides presentation? Oh, I should have shared my screen. And thanks for reminding me, actually. I'm glad you did. Okay, there we go.
Donc voilà, du coup, je vous remonte juste peut-être, et moi aussi, parce que c'était, je trouvais que la carte était...
Okay, let me...
Donc, comme je disais, Maroc et la Tunisie, et puis les pays d'Asie aussi, l'Amérique du Sud, etc. Donc on est un petit peu partout. Voilà, donc ça c'est pour l'initiative.
Okay, this is just to show the electric mobility in Rwanda, background and feasibility report. I don't know if we have anyone listening who is familiar with this.
Je voulais présenter
I just wanted to present two countries where we worked.
Qui sont, enfin, un d'entre eux est parmi nous, ça je les ai vus.
One is already here with us. Another project was in Rwanda.
C'est un projet sur la mobilité électrique, donc c'est un petit peu
and
spécifique.
we had a project on electric mobility, which is more specific.
Bien sûr, aller calculer les émissions aujourd'hui.
And we had to go and calculate the various emissions. So we did this for the whole of Rwanda, and mainly in Kigali, which is of course the main city, and the city that has the main data. So we were able to use both local and national data.
Voilà, donc par exemple, vous voyez
For example, this is the kind of results which we would expect in this kind of activity. Here on the left, you see the number of cars per category, whether it be minibus, microbus, jeeps, cars, etc. So we have this from the national statistics.
Par exemple,
which helped us.
un exemple
Another
de problème, là où j'appelle
example
ça un
of
peu le chat et la
issue
souris, c'est par exemple quand on
which
a
we were
le nombre de
facing.
véhicules, ça nous dit pas
Number
forcément
of
qu'ils sont
vehicles
sur les
does not
routes.
necessarily
Et
tell
souvent, il n'y a pas de
you
désenregistrement.
the
Donc, par exemple, vous
number
avez
of
une
cars
liste
on the
de véhicules,
road.
mais vous ne savez pas lesquels roulent, lesquels ne roulent pas.
You may have a number
Donc,
of
par exemple,
vehicles
là,
registered, but you don't know which
eh
one
bien,
are
c'est un
actually
gros
running on
travail
the
de
road. So that's
recherche pour essayer de
another big
trouver quelle est
research
la
which
flotte
you need to
active,
do.
on appelle
You need to
ça.
actually look for the
Donc
active
voilà, ça, c'est
fleets in a country.
des petits défis
These
par
are
rapport
some
aux
kind
données.
of challenges which you can
Donc,
come
une fois
across
qu'on
when
a les
doing
nombres de
data
véhicules,
collection. Now, once you
souvent,
have
on
all
fait des
the,
scénarios hein, la plupart du temps, mais c'est pas
then
obligatoire.
once
Mais
you have the number of vehicles,
souvent, c'est un
then
peu
you
le
can
but aussi.
start
On projette
making
le nombre de véhicules, entre autres.
scenarios.
On
You
va
try to
multiplier,
project the
faire des
number of
kilométrages.
vehicles
Donc
multiplied
là,
by
c'est
the number
pareil,
of
c'est un certain nombre de
kilometers
données,
with
d'hypothèses, et on va
a
discuter
number of
avec éventuellement des
hypotheses and
universités, avec des experts
scenarios
locaux
from
qui vont essayer
local
de nous
experts
indiquer un
or
petit peu
universities
dans
which
quel sens ça va.
indicate
Et puis, on va
which
calculer à
way
base
this
du
is going, and then
scénario
we make a
les émissions
calculation
de
on the
GES
basis of our scenario of gas
émises.
emission.
Donc là, je n'ai pas pu vous mettre les résultats du
I could
projet
not
parce que
actually give you the
c'est
results,
pas
the outcome of this project, because
les
it
montrer.
is still,
Le projet n'est pas encore, enfin,
it is not yet completed.
comment l'étude n'est pas encore accessible. Donc, voilà.
It's not yet
Et par contre, ça, c'est des
accessible.
données disponibles pour tout le monde. C'est la part des transports et des
Okay,
autres,
this data
des
you
autres
can
secteurs dans
you
les
can
émissions.
have, you can
Au Rwanda,
see
donc vous voyez que
in
même
Rwanda, other
là, en
sectors,
2015
energy
déjà,
industry,
ils
transport,
arrivaient presque
etc.
à
In
un tiers,
2015, it was almost
avec,
one
par
third
exemple, pour
due to
ce qu'on appelle les poids
transport,
lourds, en fait,
especially
les
with
minibus
trucks,
et les bus
lorries,
sont une partie
minibuses,
très, très importante des
and
émissions.
heavy trucks. Buses are
Donc ça,
actually
par
a
exemple,
large part of
c'est
the
des
gas
données locales.
emission.
C'est des données locales qui
These
sont
are all
remontées
local
par
data which
différentes,
we
alors c'est
got.
le transport informel, alors là, c'est pareil,
It's
vous allez trouver les données.
informal
Ça
transport,
va pas toujours facile.
not always easy to
Donc
get
voilà, et
the
donc là, on a
appropriate
calculé quel
data.
était
So we
l'avantage
made a
de mettre
calculation
de la mobilité électrique
and
au Rwanda,
to try
principalement les
to
2 roues. Et
show
on a montré que
the
c'était mieux
relevance of electric
que le système
mobility,
actuel.
mainly
Pareil, je
for
ne peux pas
two
vous montrer les
wheels
résultats pour des raisons de confidentialité.
vehicles. I
Et
cannot show
l'autre
you the
projet qu'on
results
a
for
fait était en
confidential
Tunisie, qui là, était
reasons. Now,
un
the
plan
second
national de la
project which we
mobilité
run
urbaine.
was in
Donc, il y
Tunisia.
avait la ville de
We
Sfax,
did
d'ailleurs, qui
a
ont
urban
fait aussi
mobility
un gros
national
travail sur ce
plan.
sujet-là.
We did
Et
a
en fait,
big
là,
work
c'était
on this.
donc c'était pareil, les gros points qui sont revenus. Donc,
What came
quand on a
out
récupéré les
mainly
données, on a
when
mis
we
tous les
collected all
acteurs
the
ensemble.
data, when we
C'était
sat
plus au niveau
together all the
national, mais les villes ont
stakeholders,
été aussi
mainly at a national level,
mises
but
à
cities were
contribution.
also
Et
involved and
ce qu'on a pu
contributed to
voir, en
this
fait, c'est
project.
que
So what we
c'était la
realized,
coordination, l'aspect gouvernance qui était très, très difficile
it
quand
was what was
elle n'était
difficult
pas
was
là.
actually the
La mettre en place,
coordination
c'était un très gros
within the
travail.
governing bodies. It was difficult to
Et
install this sort
on
of
s'est retrouvé en fait
coordination.
aussi avec les mêmes
So we
problèmes
realized that we were
qu'au
facing the similar
Rwanda
problems
et
that
dans
we had in
quasiment tous les pays
Rwanda,
en fait.
and
Le
actually
problème de
in most of the
désenregistrement, c'est qu'on
countries,
ne sait pas en
is
vérité
that
combien de véhicules sont sur les
we
routes.
don't really need at the
Et
end.
puis,
No,
on ne
sorry.
sait
At the
pas
end of
non
the day,
plus,
how many vehicles
en
are on
Tunisie,
the
il y avait un
road?
aspect spécial,
In
c'est que les
Tunisia,
ventes,
there was
par
another
exemple, de fuel,
specificity. For
il y
example,
avait
fuel.
en fait des ventes, ce qu'on appelle sous le manteau. Donc, en
There's
fait, quand on
illegal
comparait les
selling
valeurs de
of
vente par rapport
fuel.
aux
So
valeurs
if we were to
d'activité, on se rendait
compare
compte qu'il y avait une grosse différence. Et cette
compare
différence
the
était en fait due
statistics,
parce
we
au fait
realized that there was a
que
huge
les
gap
combustibles
because
sont
there is
vendus
a lot
non
of
officiellement. Donc ça, c'est pareil, ça fait un petit
illegal
défi pour les
markets
personnes qui sont obligées de
of
retrouver les données.
fuel.
Parce
Of
que
course, this
forcément,
is another
on ne peut
challenge.
pas comparer.
You
Ça rend
cannot
les
compare.
calculs
It
un petit peu plus
makes things
difficiles.
difficult.
Voilà, donc là-bas, on avait fait tout un scénario et donc
We
voilà,
had our
ici, vous voyez ces
scenario,
résultats.
and you can
Quand
see
on
the
avait
results
réussi
at
à
the bottom.
diminuer,
We managed
à
to
diminuer clairement les
diminish
émissions
quite
à l'horizon
clearly
2050 en faisant tout un scénario
greenhouse
avec des
gas
acteurs,
emissions
que ce soit
through various
les sociétés de
scenarios,
bus, que ce
whether
soit
it be through bus
les agences nationales
companies,
ou régionales,
national or regional
avec qui on a
agencies.
discuté pendant de nombreux workshops pour essayer de
So
mettre en
we
place un
worked
scénario
through
qui nous
different
aiderait
workshops. We tried to look
à
at a
diminuer donc les
possible and
émissions.
relevant
Et on voit ici, alors,
scenario to help
les
reduce the gas
types
emissions.
de mesures ont été
You
sélectionnées
can
en fait, pour
see
ce
here on
scénario.
this graphic the kind of measures that were
Voilà.
chosen and collected.
Donc, j'ai fait assez
I think
rapidement.
that's about it
N'hésitez
for
pas si
me,
vous avez des
but please
questions.
do not hesitate if you have any other questions. Thank you very much, Marie, for your presentation. Very interesting indeed. The issue of mobility, electric mobility and transport is often forgotten when it comes to national climate strategy in many African countries. because of the difficulty of accessing data and relying on the data. Just one last question for you, Marie. Now, the data which you are trying to collect through your research work, are these data made available to non-state actors, or are the decision makers a bit reluctant to share these
C'est une
data?
bonne question.
That's a good question, actually.
Alors, évidemment, la réponse n'est pas simple.
It's not an easy answer. It would be too easy.
Alors, il y a une partie des données qui sont
Part
de
of
toute
the
façon
data actually
à disposition, parce que ça fait partie des
are
statistiques officielles. Par exemple, le
available
nombre de
because they are
véhicules est
part of the
bien sûr
official statistics, and number of
officiellement
vehicles, for
disponible sur un
example,
certain nombre
is
de
something you
sites
can find on
internet. Elles peuvent
various
demander aussi d'ailleurs
internet
aux agences gouvernementales.
websites. They can also be asked to
Il y a néanmoins, et ça dépend
governmental
des pays, ça
agencies,
dépend de la
but
culture des
depending on
pays. Il y a des
countries and the
des
culture of the
pays
country,
où il y
some
a vraiment
countries
une
indeed,
culture très difficile de l'ouverture des données, effectivement, et elles sont très
some
peu
countries it
partagées,
is difficult to
même entre
share
les
data, even
ministères
to
entre eux,
access
quand on travaille
data,
au
even
national.
between ministries at a
Donc
government.
ça, c'est un gros problème et c'est
That's a real
une
issue.
partie des choses auxquelles on
And
travaille
this
pour
is
essayer de
part of the
créer
thing that
une
we are
espèce
doing, is to try to
des accords en
create
fait de travail
some
entre
form
ne
of
serait-ce que les différents
agreements
ministères et éventuellement avec les personnes qui travaillent
between the
avec ces
various
ministères,
ministries and the
donc avec
various
des acteurs
bodies,
éventuellement non étatiques.
and also possibly with non-state
Et
actors.
puis il y a le problème aussi
Now,
de
another issue which we're facing
comment dirais-je, de les réunir.
is
Ces données, c'est le gros problème, c'est que ce sont
the
après
way
des données
to gather
complexes.
all the
Et donc, il faut
data.
les mettre
Some
sous
of
un
these data are
format et puis
complex. We
les
need to
actualiser.
translate them
Et
into
donc,
a
ça demande
format
du temps et
and
de l'argent
update them,
de
and
faire
it
ça.
requires, of
Et
course,
donc,
a
avant
lot
que les
of
données
time
soient
and a lot
disponibles
of
pour tout
money.
le monde,
So before
en
the
fait, il
data can
faudrait
be available to
créer ce genre
everyone, we would need to
d'initiative.
create
J'en
this
discute
kind
depuis des années avec
of
un certain
initiative.
nombre
We've
d'agences
been
de développement.
talking with some
Une initiative
development
qui permettrait
agencies
d'avoir des
for
données
years to
disponibles
try to have an
pour les
initiative that would
pays
help
qu'on
make
appelle
these
en voie de
data
développement,
available
donc des
for
pays
developing
africains, mais aussi des
countries
pays
in
d'Asie.
Africa
Comme
mainly,
nous,
and
on
also
a
in
par
Asia.
exemple l'Eurostat qui nous
Like
permet
we
d'avoir un
have, for
certain nombre de
example, the
données sur tous les
Eurostat,
pays
which
européens.
gives
Et
you
on a
access
plein de
to a
bases de
number of
données à gauche, à droite
statistics on
qui
a
nous permettent quand
European
même d'avoir
level.
un certain nombre de données. Ça n'existe pas
This
ou
does
très
not
peu
really
pour les pays
exist, or
en voie de
very
développement
little,
dans
in
le domaine du
developing
transport.
countries in the area of transport.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for your answer to this question.
Je ne sais pas, je demanderai à Amaury si
I don't know, I want to ask Amaury
quelques questions.
if we have time maybe for a few questions. Thank you to all of our panelists and speakers. I just wanted to take a quick look at the result of our survey or questionnaire, just to get an idea, first of all, and identify together what would be the priorities for the activities data. First priority, without any surprises, to involve local stakeholders in the collection of activity data. Not everyone voted anyway, but among those who voted, this is the first priority. The second one, we strengthen the training of stakeholders for an adequate use of data. And I think that would answer many of the questions in the chat box. Once you have all this data, to get an idea of the possible action, you need to, of course, then develop strategies and strengthen the training. And then third position, or quite close to each other, the next third one, build national strategies for combining data sources, make data more accessible to non-state actors for local action, and mobilize additional resources for the production of robust data. This is something which we had come to the conclusion in the last workshop, was to mobilize, actually, strangely enough, mobilizing additional resources is not seen as a top priority. So I would say this is a sign that there are already means available, which either are not necessarily well used. Therefore, there is a desire to have a better coordination between the actors, stakeholders. Now I'm going to ask all of our speakers to quickly react to this questionnaire and the results of this questionnaire, maybe in just 1 minute. What would be your feeling and your comments on this questionnaire, the way we have sorted these priorities, and according to you, are there any priorities that would be missing in our statement? Marie, would you like to comment?
Alors, impliquer les acteurs et les territoires, je suis absolument d'accord. Dans la
Involving
collecte de
local
données,
stakeholders
c'est
in the collection of
un
data,
gros défi.
activity
C'est un
data,
gros
of
défi
course, is
parce
a
que déjà
huge
rien qu'au niveau
challenge.
national, les coordinations
Even at
sont
the
parfois
national
compliquées.
level, as I
Mais
said,
donc au niveau
coordination is
local,
not
ça
always
demande une
easy.
très grosse
And at the
coordination. Enfin, en tout cas, ça
local
dépend si on fait que
level,
le
it would
niveau local ou si
require
on
an
veut
even greater
effectivement
coordination.
faire des
Depends
réseaux
if we want
qui
to
marchent
focus
entre eux, donc des
only on the
différentes
local
villes qui
level, or if we
pourraient
want to
donner
do
les résultats, etc.
coordination
de
at
ce qu'ils font.
various levels.
Je trouve que ça serait vraiment effectivement très intéressant.
I think that would be really interesting.
Et renforcer les formations des acteurs, je pense que c'est
Also,
aussi
strengthening the training of
absolument
stakeholders is also key.
essentiel parce que c'est là effectivement où il y a quand même un gros besoin, je pense,
I think there is a
parce que c'est
huge
des choses
need
qui se
there.
créent en fait. Hein.
This
Le
is something
climat,
that
c'est
is
tout nouveau
being
pour plein de
done.
monde et ça demande en fait effectivement d'apprendre parce que c'est
And
très
it
neuf tout ça.
requires a lot of training and learning. Thank you. Joël, would you like to comment on this questionnaire and the results of this quick survey?
Donc, effectivement,
Yes,
je suis
indeed. I agree with
la première option.
the first priority, which everyone chose, or the majority of the people who voted,
Stratégie qu'on a essayé
which is a strategy which we also try to implement in our various projects,
notamment la convention des maires,
especially within the Covenant of Mayors. One of the principles was to actually work with field teams. Just as Marie was saying, this topic is a bit newer for most of the institutions. So the trend was to bring the expertise from elsewhere without the transfer of competence, actually. So we were aware of this right from the start. So we got the stakeholders involved, and actually the stakeholders themselves were mobilized to go and collect the data. They were involved in the data handling, though we did have the technical oversight to it. So that was really the objective, was to be able to train our stakeholders and get them involved as much as possible so that the skills could remain even afterwards. Thank you, Joël. Over to Jafarou now. Would you like to comment on this, Jafarou, this quick survey that we run? What would be your feeling about these priorities? Jafarou?
Yes, I'm here. Hello? Hello?
Oui, on vous
Yes,
entend.
we can
We
hear
hear
you.
you.
Okay. Particularly, I have I would say these priorities are in place, but I want to stress the issue of the continent or the region or the people we are working with as international organizations. The priority is to give them the ability to support the process. Whatever we are doing in terms of data collection, they should be at the forefront supporting the process because we are like a support to them. So this is something I just want to stress. But in overall, I think it is the priorities. Yeah, I think for me it's okay. It's okay. It's fine.
Ok. Donc on peut en faire aussi des
Okay, great. So this could be some items for our advocacy, which is the purpose also of climate change, is to federate non-state actors and to try to bring out some key points and messages for our advocacy. Now over to Gabrielle, would you like to comment, maybe? Would you like to conclude or give your opinion about this questionnaire, this survey? Yes, thank you. First of all, my first reaction or first impression is a bit like what you said, Vanessa, the mobilization of means actually comes last in the priorities, which is not often the case, which shows that, yes, there are already a lot of things existing. And the first priority would be the involvement of local stakeholders. I know that among our participants, we do have local stakeholders, and it shows the importance and the desire to be involved in the collection of data, of activity data. I think it's very important to have good, reliable data. Another comment maybe on this survey would be the need to have both a national framework to exchange information, share information between various ministries and various sectors. It is true that often in some countries, they do not often talk to each other or share information. So it would be good to have a national kind of a framework across the various sectors, and to make things easier at the international level to feed the various database, like what we've seen in Europe. Indeed, it's a question of cooperation and collaboration. Now, regarding the involvement of local stakeholders, we have national strategies which are very centralized. So the challenge would actually be to bring them to the local, at the local level. Therefore, the involvement of the stakeholders will need to be done, because at the end of the day, the local stakeholders actually hold a great part of the data and have a greater capacity to collect these data and share the data. So I think it can be done. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time. I will not be able to continue. I think we have covered pretty much a lot of the questions that were asked by the chat box. So what we will do is that we will pass on your questions to the various speakers if we have not addressed these questions, so that no one would be frustrated. But we will also send you the links and the presentations of all of our participants, and also the list of the various initiatives that have been proposed through the questionnaire, which you found on the menti.com website. Through this questionnaire, you can also share about your local initiatives and strengthen the access to activity data. So please share your comments, share your initiatives through the use of this website, and Climate Change will also take this on board. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of our participants. Sorry we did not have enough time to give you the floor, but we will meet again for our next workshop on gas emission. I don't know if Amaury can remind us of the date. Actually, it's not been fixed yet. It will be in January. And when we start the second cycle of the virtual workshops, one of our workshops in January will be addressing the third workshop of this series, which we've just done today. I will send you the link. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marie-Gabrielle, Jafarou, and Joël, for your participation.
Au revoir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci, à bientôt.
Merci à vous, à bientôt.
Moi, j'ai pas pu parler.
Ouais, salut.
Merci, au revoir, à bientôt, bye.
Au revoir, à bientôt. Merci
Au
tout le monde.
revoir.